Welcome to the Westside Investors Network, WIN, your community of investing knowledge for growth. This is the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast for real estate professionals by real estate professionals. This show is focused on the next step in your career, investing. Thank you for listening, and please, if you like our content, rate us on your podcast provider. And now, your hosts, AJ and Chris Shepard.
In today's episode, Zach will be joining us to talk about human automation process and how to leverage technology in the real estate industry. He's the head of the customer success at LeadSimple and helps plan, develop, and train people to use automation tools that help grow and scale their businesses. He also discusses the theory of constraints and how to use technology to resolve the constraints in a business and improve the overall process. Enjoy. All right. Well, we got Zach Berkompas with us today from LeadSimple. He's an optimization expert, and he's been in the technology field a long time. Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Awesome. Thanks so much, AJ, for having me on today. So I come from a software background. Ever since I was fascinated with computers ever since I've been young, and Dad would bring home the latest, coolest thing as we were growing up. And so just kind of grew up in technology. But I love people, and I love interacting with people. And so ultimately, my sweet spot is taking technology and merging that with helping people solve real world problems. So that's where ultimately, over the course of quite a few years, doing a lot of process consulting, startups in Silicon Valley, ultimately have landed in the head of customer success position at LeadSimple, kind of merging everything that we're doing on the product end of things in with the best customer experience that we can produce for our clients so that our clients can serve their customers far better than they currently can, and actually leverage technology and process automation to help add what I like to call human automation. So let technology help you do certain things so you don't have to spend time doing things that aren't value added, and focus on things that you uniquely bring to the table. So that's a little bit about me. I love the outdoors here in the Pacific Northwest. I love getting outside, climbing mountains, riding my bike all around the world actually as well. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And so most of our listeners here are like real estate professionals, not necessarily all property managers. So I know LeadSimple is like a CRM, helps kind of organize and I guess streamline processes. Do you want to tell us kind of a little bit of what you're doing with them and how LeadSimple has, or kind of what it does?
Yeah, definitely. So just kind of at a high level, LeadSimple started back in 2013, focused on the property management real estate sphere, focused on basically helping particularly property managers build out and optimize their sales process, because the founders of LeadSimple had started a previous company to LeadSimple and discovered doing that property managers are terrible at follow-up, and sales was never a first-class operation within property management. It was always second-class. Day-to-day operations were always where people would focus. So we took all that knowledge. There weren't many CRMs at that point, and so LeadSimple focused particularly on the property management space to help streamline and optimize your sales process. Since then, we've taken all that knowledge and applied it to day-to-day operations, so optimizing your processes all the way from owner onboarding, property onboarding, all the way through to move-in, lease renewals, move-outs, and optimizing the flow of your company so you can be more efficient and scalable. And that ultimately obviously ties into your real estate investment, producing more, not just for the property management company, but also having a better experience for your tenants and your owners ultimately. And that's what we want to facilitate, is to help our clients provide the best customer experience they can to their owners and tenants.
That sounds awesome. So that's just kind of like an overview of LeadSimple. Now we're going to kind of like dig into you, like how.
Yes.
So how did you get started in real estate, or kind of in that technology sphere that supports real estate?
Yeah. So backing up way at the beginning, like I said, interested in technology. I actually started in high school working for a software consulting firm. And that software consulting firm grew and merged with another one. And I was doing B2B consulting, building out software, greenfield, as well as updating new and old systems for companies across the US. And so flying around the US, working with a bunch of different companies, and some of them ended up being real estate related software companies. And so ultimately I became far more interested in the space. I'm also very much on the investment end of things. And so we can get into that a little bit in terms of what I'm planning to do around real estate investing. So I know that's a particular interest of the podcast. But basically, that was just very interesting to me. It seemed like so many people end up in real estate one way or the other, and I wanted to do it the right way and not the wrong way. And so an opportunity came up to slide into a development position at LeadSimple, actually help build out the product more. And it was an offer. I wasn't looking to move at that point, but it was an offer I really couldn't refuse. And so I jumped in there with the founders of LeadSimple and really have fleshed out the product to a really broad degree. So basically, I know the back end of the product down to the code level, but I also really ultimately love people. And so I pulled out of day-to-day software engineering into managing our success team, which is really the delivery mechanism of the product. Software is just a tool, and it's just there. And there's so many pieces that you have that are, more soft skills that actually go into implementing it, getting team buy-in, and producing the value. So own the outcome is a core value here at LeadSimple, and that's what I'm all about. And I love the real estate and property management industry, part of because I love its resilience. So like if we have a market downturn, there's always opportunity within this space. Now, either it's a seller's market or it's a buyer's market. And if there's a downturn, you guys are going to have a lot more accidental landlords. It's going to weather that storm a lot better than other industries that I've seen. Obviously, you have to be prepared for that, but that's something that really interests me in real estate. And also, I love the fact that, with market economics and everything we see going on, you can use leverage wisely to get into real estate in a way that you may not have been able to.
So maybe tell us a little bit about what you're thinking personally in real estate, or kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, definitely. So real estate, like I've said, obviously you have to have capital, and you have to have that. And so definitely having a career that can fuel that personally is definitely important. And that's where I'd encourage people to start and focus, and then just start learning and reading. I would emphasize, listening to podcasts like this for ideas, as well as there's a bunch of really good books out there, and focusing on your story and building your story. And we'll get into that. But personally for me, I'm focused on right now in a position to buy in this year, and it's really just evaluating the market. You guys are in a similar market here, and I have an opportunity on a single family, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, basically what everyone wants right now. But it's basically digging up deals directly with owners is my strategy, and trying to cut down on closing costs by doing a direct buy.
And are you doing that on the side?
Correct.
Nice.
Correct.
And then I got a question for you. Are you using LeadSimple to keep track of all that stuff?
Yes. So I have LeadSimple, and obviously I get access to that. And also my entire team on the LeadSimple end, we use LeadSimple internally to track all of our current clients, as well as all of our sales workflow for just LeadSimple itself. So that kind of shows how flexible it is.
So what I think we want to do is we want to dig into your core value is own the outcome, right? And maybe dig in a little bit into how you help these companies out, and what some of our listeners, maybe real estate professionals that are maybe hiring their first employee, or trying to get some people to help them, maybe part-time, maybe full-time. So can you kind of give us an example of what you go in and help someone do by setting up the CRM, and what processes are easy to automate, and how that can help free up that person's time so that they can spend more time on quality things?
Exactly. So I would say all of us have the conundrum of working in the business and then working on the business. So everyone has that conundrum, and everyone has limited time. So what I like to do, and many of you may have heard of this concept before, but it's applying the theory of constraints. So the theory of constraints was popularized by the book, it's a novel, The Goal in Small Manufacturing. So it's focusing on identifying the constraint within your current business or your current self, where you're spending your time, and then optimizing the constraint with the understanding that if you add capacity above the constraint or below the constraint, it doesn't matter until that constraint gets bigger. So if you think about it as a funnel, then it comes down to a point, at some point, the constraint, which may be your time in a particular area. It may be a particular person. It may be a department, depending on where you're at. But identifying that constraint, that is the only place that will actually affect throughput and the outcome in your business. So
kind of like on a basic level, if you've got an hourglass and you've got the sand,
yes,
like you're trying to find that spot where only a little bit of sand can get through and how to open that up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that's kind of the basic, and then applying that to manufacturing, the book, The Goal, I'd highly recommend. It's an enjoyable read, but applying that back as it relates to small business, software, and real estate is the most likely constraint you have is you and your time. That's just across the board. And it's not a matter of your skill. It's not a matter of if you can do everything, because you probably can. It's a matter of should you be, and how do you get to that incremental step of getting someone else to do it and delegating properly. So keeping all of those things in mind and in check applies. That's where I usually start with people, is talk about, okay, where we got to identify the constraint. What's the problem? What's the true constraint here, so that you don't assume one thing that truly isn't the constraint. We optimize it, and then it doesn't actually change anything. So that's classic. People go to conferences, they hear a ton of great ideas, but they end up picking the ideas that really aren't the current constraint. And then they're like, well, why didn't it work for me? Like, why didn't my business change and explode? So the constraint that I would want to focus on here is generally around the lack of use of technology to help you streamline and optimize, first, like AJ said, your sales and growth process. Now, people are in different spots. Some people can't optimize growth and sales because their day-to-day operations, frankly, suck. So they, as an owner of a small business, get sucked into day-to-day operations all the time, and they don't have the capacity to go and focus on sales and growth and learning about that and optimizing it, because their day-to-day operations really are a mess. So every business is going to be at a different point. That's generally what we find, though. You're as an owner, you're getting sucked into day-to-day operations, even though you started in sales. Like most people that started the business, I don't know about you and Chris, but one of you started on the sales end of things, and it may not have been long. You get about to that 50, 100 door point, and then you get sucked in to day-to-day operations. You're no longer able to handle the sales process. You need a process in place with automation to help plug someone into that, because it's all in your head. So that's what LeadSimple really helps people do, is take out of their head and out of their hands and put into not just a manual where it's just all written and someone reviews it once and then does something completely different, but into a software platform that allows you to keep it actionable. So you can actually do your tasks within LeadSimple, have automated emails, texts, phone calls, all be tracked, which makes it a living process. So it can be updated. It's way more living than a piece of paper or a manual you train someone on the first time. And then that allows you to leverage other people and train them by having a process that's basically laid out for them. So that's really the goal, is to take out of the owner's head onto paper and then into a system that will help you hand that off and delegate properly. And that also ties into remote employees as well. I don't know that those of you that have looked into that, but there's a lot of talent around the world that you can leverage if you have a system to keep that accountable and tracked and running smoothly. So that's something to think about too. If you're really strapped for resources and you need some help, there are a lot of really good resources around the world that you could leverage and keep your costs a little lower.
Yeah, Zach, it's Chris Shepard. Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. So what you're talking about is like maximizing technology to save time for kind of a solo operator, or maybe an operator with a small team. So yeah, I'd like to just hear more about, let's say we've got a property manager who's managing, say, 100 units, and he's working with a maintenance technician, and they're just kind of managing that portfolio. How is that person supposed to get out of the business, or out of doing the work and into, where they can actually work on the business, or maybe they're able to focus on investing in real estate. There are different routes to go. So
yeah, growth can come from different ways. Like growth can come from investing and getting more investors involved, or it can come from accidental landlords, or there's a lot of different
yeah,
opportunity.
absolutely. So like what do you think is the low hanging fruit for that scenario?
Yeah, so that scenario is pretty classic. You got 1 to 3 people, usually around 3, trying to manage 100 units. You're swamped and overloaded. Lease renewal season comes around. It's basically, well, excuse my French, but lease renewal hell is pretty much a common term for that size, because you got like 30, 40 leases that end up coming up in a really short period of time because of the seasonality. So what I would say is, again, the constraint in that scenario is the owner, the person has their fingers in everything, and it's identifying the lowest hanging fruit that can be delegated to other people. So thinking about your unique value add, if you are really operationally focused, then it may be we need to look at optimizing the sales process that could be handled by someone else. If you are more growth minded and you're able to dig up investors and do all of that, your time would probably be best spent in fine tuning your operations so that can be handed off so you can shift to your unique skill set. So it's evaluating what your unique skill set is, and then you're going to go basically one of 2 paths.
All right. So like, let's say that this operator is pretty good at sales, but they're running around with their head cut off,
Right.
trying to run the business. Like, and it's difficult to hire when you don't have any processes. And so how can someone who is, just overwhelmed with just doing the work actually find that time and energy to create the processes and then leverage technology and then other people
and I think
help them get the work done?
I think what Chris is asking too is like, what's the minimum next step? Like what's their next step?
Yeah. So if you're in that boat, the next step is first you need to have a why. So Simon Sinek, if you guys heard about him, start with why. You always have to have a driving force. There's going to be pain involved in any of these, changes. Change is always moving forward, and there's always a little bit of pain involved. So you got to have a solid why about why in the world am I doing this? Why am I in business? All that has to be in place. And then I would say what you're going to be focusing on in that case, if they're good at sales, is streamlining day-to-day operations, even if it's not your favorite thing. And there are a lot of good resources out there. I get connected in a group of people, someone that's ahead of you. So you need to be finding either local or around the NARPM is a great place to go to find some people that are way more experienced than you are, that are ahead of you, and then start having conversations there just for your own encouragement and growth. Just be like, this is a path I want to be on. I'm not where I want to be yet. So tie that in. That's a critical piece. And then really start focusing on documenting and streamlining your processes. But I would say, don't reinvent the wheel. This is not rocket science, and it's part of what LeadSimple has developed as well. So we give everyone on the day-to-day operations side of things a really solid starting point with all the core processes. And then we also basically have different paths that we support. So if you want to do it more yourself, you can do that. If you want to work with our team of property managers and people have done this over and over again, then we support that as well. But there's plenty of people that have solid resources when it comes to operations, because that's where people have been focused in the property management space. Operations is like king, and sales has always kind of been more of an afterthought. So there are really solid resources out there I would leverage, as well as get a mentor that's way ahead of you. And that's, at the 5, 6, 7, 8,000 door point. There are a lot of really good people that you should get plugged in with just to have that encouragement and set up, biweekly call with them. There are a lot of different ways to go in that regard, but you have to streamline your day-to-day operations before you start filling your funnel with a bunch of new leads that then get a crappy experience. Because if your operations are really messed up and you can't leverage your team to execute well, then you're going to have a terrible customer experience. And then all the marketing effort that you spend up front will ultimately be wasted as you lose those clients to a bad experience.
That has happened to just about every business owner. You grow, and then you break the system, and then and then you fix the system, and then you're back to growing again until you break it.
Yep.
Cool. So like your focus is technology and taking a process and then applying technology to it. Can you just like maybe pick an example of something that LeadSimple does with a simple process, and then just give the audience a little more detail on like, how is that actually saving time? How does this make it easier to delegate? And like what's the overall benefit?
Yeah. So I think what I would start with, if we're continuing with that, I think break down property management into 2 core cycles. This won't be new to you all, but for the benefit of those on the listening, basically I break property management down into the onboarding cycle and the property turn cycle. Onboarding starts right after the sale has been made. You have a property management agreement, contract signed. You go into owner onboarding. Then you've got property onboarding for however many properties they're bringing on. If they're bringing on multiple, it's good to keep those processes separate because you have current clients that bring on new properties as well, and you don't need to do the owner onboarding steps. So you got owner onboarding, property onboarding, make readies, making the property rent ready. Then you got marketing, tenant applications, move in. And that's like your first core cycle. The second core cycle in property management is lease renewals. So that usually starts 90 days before the lease is up, or some people do even 120. Then you move to move out. There's a lot of outcomes from lease renewals that I could get into, but usually, you move to move out, which then flows straight back into make ready, marketing, tenant application, and move in. As you can see, you can reuse those processes because those 2 cycles are easily set up. So that's the way LeadSimple has thought about it, and the paradigm that we've applied. And so usually I tell people you need to start with one of those cycles to get the full value out of any sort of system that you adopt. And so generally, if your focus is on day-to-day operations because they're not really defined well, I tell everyone to start with lease renewals. It's a critical process. If you can streamline that, make it better, and have more tenant retention, your unit economics are going to go up. Your experience for tenants and owners is going to be better, and that can really help you optimize. As well as you can just come right back around and do owner and property onboarding afterwards, as well as optimize your sales process. So keep in mind, Rome wasn't built in a day. Your processes, your business won't be built in a day. You have to take incremental steps. So usually that's how I break it down. And then if we were going to start with lease renewals, for example, LeadSimple has an awesome starter base that I like to say is about 60 to 70% there. We can't get it, too much further than that because every business has different, regulations, different fees, different plans set up. And so there's always going to be some that you need to add, but we want to give everyone a starting point because it's way easier to update than it is to create. And that's something for you to keep in mind with your owners too, or just in your life. It's way easier to update than it is to create. And so if you're asking your people or your owners or LeadSimple is asking our clients just to create all the time, that's way harder for them than giving them a starting point to show them what's possible and then let them update it.
That is a really good point. AJ and I have spent a ton of time like creating processes and having a starting point. Like, and we've asked our employees too to like create as well. And I can just see the anxiety, just oh my God, I have to create something. So I think that's an awesome point. Just giving them just a little starting point,
One thing that we did too is like as we go through the day, you just start writing down like what you're doing, like just every step, just like write down the step, and then it takes just a couple extra minutes, but just recording the idea of like the different steps can really help out when you're essentially like programming or kind of like developing these checklists on the process and what needs to happen. So
that paper section, AJ, that you brought in is also something that we like to incorporate. So to help people holistically think about, what is a process? When does it start? When does it end? Who would be involved? And then breaking it down at that point. And again, we've applied that same principle too. It's way easier to update than it is to create. So we provide pre-filled worksheets to start with, along with our templates to help people get started based on that. And what I love about it is when you're not asking someone to create, you're asking them to update. They get in there and they're like, oh, well, I would change that. And I would change this. And it's funny to see you get more of a reaction, more of a buy-in, because there's less of that upfront cognitive load to say, you got to create everything from scratch. And that's something that LeadSimple realized we have to help people have a starting point, and then they'll disagree with little things here and there. But the great thing about LeadSimple is we've made it as flexible as possible to basically be like Legos. So if you want to automate this little email here, or change this text message here, or make a call, at this point, it's all customizable. But it's easy to give someone a box of Legos and say, hey, go build a castle. But when you build, a really pretty cool castle and tell them, hey, now make this and update this castle to reflect your unique, building architectural structure, it's way easier for them to do it at that point. So that would be where I would say I would start, in terms of optimization, I'd start if you're focused on day-to-day, your core operations. Lease renewals is a great place to start because it's one that's really easy to fall through the cracks. And we've done a lot of cool things with data integration with all the major property management providers.
So Zach, I am very less involved with process automation, but I'm certainly intrigued by it. So do you want to just describe some of the base level technologies that LeadSimple is leveraging, like automatic text messages and automatic emails, data integration, just to let everybody know kind of here's the payoff. For a lease renewal, somebody's pressing a button and then clicking a few check boxes and they have sent out, and then there's automatic emails coming back.
I think at this point, sometimes there's not even checking a button. It automatically just happens.
Correct. So when we developed this, we knew data's king. Data's always king, having the data, and personalization. So I talked about this a little bit at the beginning. We believe in personalized automation. So any automation you're going to use, you make it personal. And the only way you can make it personal is if you have the ability to merge in, the owner's names, the tenant names, their different information about them that you track. So LeadSimple knew we needed to have all of that data and we need to be updating it consistently. So there's a broad range of property management software out there, and we integrate with the main ones. So AppFolio, which was fun to figure out how to do, but it's pretty cool what we figured out how to do there. AppFolio, Buildium, Rent Manager, Propertyware, so the kind of the big four, and then Yardi at some point soon will also have. But basically what we're doing is we're pulling all of your current tenant, owner, vendor, lease, unit, property information on a daily basis into LeadSimple so that you have it there to drive your processes forward. So for a lease renewal, for example, that means you can take all of your tenants within LeadSimple, filter them down to when their lease is expiring. Usually you would do this 90 days before their, so if we were triggering, I guess today, we'd be triggering May lease renewals at the beginning of February. We'd be triggering all the lease renewals for May. Then with a few clicks, you can select all those tenants, select all based on that end date, and then bulk trigger all of your lease renewal processes, which have an automated notification to the owner, if you want to have it set up that way, that lets them know this is coming up. These are the options we're planning to, offer. Let us know if you don't want to move forward. Otherwise, we're going to move forward with these options. Those are some critical things too. Always make sure that the owner communication is the right amount, and also that you're going to move forward. You're taking ownership. They've given you responsibility, and you're going to move forward without a response unless they basically structure your communication that allows them to just be great, awesome, AJ, Chris, you got it. I don't even need to respond to this email.
That is a key, frame to be presenting a property owner, is that here are the selections, and then, we're going to move forward with this one, unless you say otherwise. And it's
exactly.
And that's why they sign a power of attorney for a property. And it's so you can make decisions on their behalf. Go ahead, AJ.
Oh, yeah. What I was going to say, too, is what I really do like about the system is as you're using it to have employees do the process, you have control over what they do. It's not like this paper checklist where they just check it off. They actually, it either gets done for them or they actually do it. So, it's what's really nice about having those tasks programmed into the CRM and keeping track. And like, I can go back and review like what was actually done.
Yeah. What people said, because that's a huge thing. This isn't just a simple checklist that's just like, it's not a digital checklist. It's actually full communication tracking as well. So emails, calls, text messages can all be made within the process, either automated or not, and then tracked holistically as well. So you can come back and be like, hey, did Joe actually do our process? Whereas if you've got a paper checklist, Joe may just check it off, or if you've got a manual, he may read it once and have his own process that he does on the side. So there's really, infinite opportunity here. And I just want to emphasize that coming back to own the outcome, that is a core principle for LeadSimple. And like, we get on the phone with people, we jump in, and my whole team has grown significantly just by our massive growth in the last year after we've done this launch of new operations focused features, to just be able to have that bandwidth to jump on the phone, to get into people's real business. And you ultimately become a business consultant, because sometimes we're like, hey, you really actually need to hire someone in the maintenance coordination role, and having a process in that to set that up, you can leverage a remote employee to do that. There's no reason not to, and it will keep your costs down. So you become really a consultant for the business because you're helping them optimize their process, which goes way deeper than just a checklist.
That is awesome. Cool. Do you want to just hit some of the technology highlights, whether it's, so you mentioned kind of data integration, and we kind of like touched on like a technology, like if this, then that. I know that's kind of the old technology now, but I want to say
I'll hit some highlights.
A bunch of our listeners probably don't know that much about the tech that is out there for automation.
Yeah. So when it comes to automation, again, human automation is best. Making it very personal is best. Text-based is best. But highlights in terms of technology, so data integration, pulling in all of your data from your accounting software within property management. You guys, I know, use Appfolio. A lot of people do. Propertyware is the next biggest one, and you got Buildium. And so pulling that in is key, and having that be automated so you don't have to double data entry all the time is critical. Then, automating text messages with local area code numbers, so people are far more likely to pick things up and respond to you. If you have a first contact, if you can contact an owner within 5 minutes of when they reached out to you, you have 135% higher likelihood of closing that owner, because he is looking at, he's probably on the next competitor's website, almost about to enter their form, and you got to them first. So time to first contact, that's something that LeadSimple helps you do by actually instantly calling you when a new lead comes in. So instantly calling you and giving you the chance to press 1 to call that owner back if you have the availability. Obviously, making sure that someone does that is key, even if it's just a warm body receptionist or remote employee that you have, just to have that initial conversation, ask that owner a few questions, and be the first to touch them. So that's a really key automation, is that first response time. And then throughout all of your processes, all of us write emails again and again and again, and property management is so focused on is process. You guys are doing the same thing. You're trying to deliver the same customer experience on every single property with the small nuances there. And so having templates that reflect what you write over and over and over, both text messages and emails tied together, can save so much time. Even if it's a manual template, you're going to click and send it, make a few adjustments, it can save massive amounts of time. So having that automation, and then processes can be set up, like you said, with if this, then that. So based on the data that we have, we can say, okay, if this property has an HOA, these steps apply. If it doesn't, then the steps are skipped and they are hidden. So you can basically have the process really reflect the property you're working on, the owner you're working with, whatever it may be, so that you don't show a bunch of steps that don't apply. I could go on and on how to integrate and all of that. We also integrate with Zapier, which connects to tons of other apps if you don't want to do some cool automation there. I personally do quite a bit internally with my team as we hook up Calendly for scheduling on calendar scheduling and all of that into LeadSimple. So we do a lot of integration in that regard. But there's plenty of things possible. If you want to reach out, I'd be happy to talk more about it.
We looked into using Lob to send notices, and that's been one of Chris's things, like, having someone in the office print it out and then send it, or like stamp it, mail it, and then send it has been kind of one of our banes. Like, it's not something that's very fun.
We had that set up for 72-hour notices and 30-day notices, but with the rent moratorium, that shut that down.
Right. No, Lob is awesome. Yeah. And you can integrate that with LeadSimple as well, based on a stage change or a task being completed. Mm-hmm. You can say send Lob mailer, and that triggers Lob.
Yeah.
I thought we found out that it wasn't getting mail there on time though. Did they resolve that?
We were just using their API to create PDFs, and then which is awesome. Like, we had a form, and then we would use Zapier and their API, and it would create a PDF, and we would just download the PDF, and it was It made it so that no one had to use DocuSign to fill out forms. They would just go to a Google Sheet, copy and paste all of the past due tenants, and then the PDFs would show up 5 minutes later, as opposed to doing 10 or 15 DocuSign need to be manually filled out. But with the 30-day, it was taking 2 weeks for one of those letters to get out. So with the 30-day notice, we could totally lob those, but the 72-hour notices, we would have to just, and I don't know if it's gotten better, but those have to be mailed out.
Be faster. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of people connect with Lob and do some cool things in that regard. Sounds like we need to get a time on the calendar to geek out over how that could work in the future.
Right.
But I know we're...
Well, cool. Well, Chris, you got some follow-up questions, or should we get to the final?
I think we got to close it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and get the first one going. So, Zach, I know that you're a younger guy, so you might have a different answer to this one, but we typically ask, what's one piece of advice you would give your 25-year-old self?
Yeah. So as I would say, I'm actually in my 25th year and just started work earlier than most. So I've been around. People think I'm older than I am, but I'm going to default back to what my mentor told me recently, specifically about this. And I just want to pass it on. Again, if you can find a mentor that's way ahead of you, definitely look into that. It's been fantastic and phenomenal for me. But what he told me, and what I would say, is the decade between 20 and 30 is a time for maturity. So becoming mature, becoming a full person, coming into your own, really. You're not a kid anymore. And then number 2, financial responsibility. So becoming financially responsible, learning how to utilize money well, budget, do all those things, because most people within that age group really struggle in that regard, and it can really change the trajectory of your life. And then number 3 is build your story. And that relates to not just your career, but take away that people buy stories. They don't buy resumes. So having a story that is compelling, working for companies that are more well-known in the space that you're particularly interested in, working with organizations that are well-known, and building a story that then you can execute on later in life. So that's what he's told me. That's what I'm putting into practice. Now that would be my answer.
Cool. I like that. Have you read Set for Life by Scott Trench?
No, I haven't read that. I worked on with Michael Hyatt's Living Forward, which might be similar, but definitely I'll put that on my reading list.
You should absolutely read it. It's our next book club book. I decided
awesome.
Today. We just read The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which is another amazing book. So, yeah. Okay. Next question. So what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor?
First entrepreneurial endeavor was landscaping. So landscaping company.
Mowing lawns.
Yeah, mowing lawns and doing that. So, and I figured out pretty quickly that there's only and no offense to anyone that's in the space, but basically you can only mow a lawn so well, and you can only do landscaping so well. And I knew that if I was going to go anywhere in that space, it had to be the owner route and fully owning a company and scaling up in that regard. But it didn't tie in with my talent around technology and my interest there. So it was great for that young kicking off years, and made some money. It was a fantastic thing to get outside and work during high school, and definitely a really good experience going through that first like setup of anything business related and licensing, all that. So it was great. Good experience.
Cool.
Very good. Next question we have is, how has your formal and informal training shaped your journey?
Yeah, so I would say I've learned a lot from formal, but I've learned more from on the job doing actual real world business. I think there's a lot to be said about academia and being good, but also at the price at which it comes and the time at which it takes nowadays. I think many people would be better served by really getting into an internship, getting into a career field, and just doing something. So, 50%, I think 50-60% of majors are never used by the people that get them. They work in some other field. So if you're really not sure where you want to land, I would say just do something, get out there, try something out. I tried landscaping first, figured out that wasn't what I wanted to do, ended up in technology. Now I'm in real estate, starting to do some investing as well as working with a bunch of real estate property management professionals, and I love it. So there's a journey to that. But I would say much of what I've learned has come from on the job mentoring and not just formal education.
So did you come in with, I guess, formal like computer programming or, information to systems degree, or?
I did not. So the only major work my major was focused on business administration and finance. So it wasn't focused on technology. And that's another example.
So informally, how did you get into technology? Was it?
Yeah, networking. So pretty much everyone in my family has actually ended up in tech in one way or the other. So a bunch of different companies. And so I knew someone and reached out for an internship. And he's like, sure, come in, unpaid internship. I worked there for a month. It was supposed to be a 3-month internship. And he's like, oh, I'm going to hire you. And so he hired me a month. So, but it was a month unpaid before that. So I had to go out on a limb first. So you might have to do that.
All right. Well, our final question is, what was your Moby Dick? I like to switch this up. The normal question is of real estate, but also like business opportunity, just like what's the one opportunity either in real estate or in life that got away?
Yeah. So real estate, I would say I'm very much hoping what I'm currently shooting to the current house that if this one gets away, I'll be very upset. So I guess I would say I'm in the middle of maybe what might be the Moby Dick for real estate. But on the work end of things, the Moby Dick for me was working with a particular client and making a mistake that cost that company it was an e-commerce company that I was working with. And I made a mistake that was significant in terms of how the code had been set up. And they took the website down for about 8 hours and lost them about $100,000 in that period of time. That's actually profit, not revenue. And that was really bad. That was 2 years into my career. And fortunately, so it was a pretty terrible few weeks surrounding that, but ultimately was able to rescue that scenario, pay for my sins, and ultimately have rescued it. But for that period of time, it was probably the worst work Moby Dick type experience I've ever had.
That is rough. That is very rough.
But I learned a lot from that. You can learn a lot from your mistakes.
So tell us about your deal. It's basically, it's an off-market deal, potential owner-carried contract.
Yeah. So basically, off-market deal discovered in the local market. They do not have a reason. That? It's actually right up in Vancouver, Washington, so not far from you guys.
Okay.
And it's someone I discovered that doesn't really have a reason to own the home. They live further away.
When you say discovered, like how'd you come in contact with them?
Yeah, so it was through looking for rentals in the area, and so figured out that they basically it's never been on the market until more or less recently, and yeah, I could get into how I figured that out. But basically, just found it via Craigslist listing, and then figured out that the owners don't really have an idea or a reason to own it, and then there's actually a little bit of a connection with them. And so that's kind of the connection. It's fairly hot market, as you guys know right now, when it comes to this type of house. And there's a lot of things about it. Like it'd be a very ideal rental. But the idea right now is to try to come in back door, to cut down a little bit on closing costs and get in, particularly with the rates being so low right now. It's a no-brainer. I've been holding off last year just to see how things would line out with the economy and everything when COVID. But basically the idea would be my wife and I would live here for a little, live at that house for a little bit because we like the location, and then flip it into a rental and move on to another investment deal after that. So that's kind of the plan. So this would be my Moby Dick if we don't get this. I'm pretty confident what I've drafted letter-wise is going to be pretty compelling to them. I'm going to be sending that tomorrow. So I'll keep you guys updated.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks so much,
Awesome.
guys. Really appreciate the conversation.
Zach, thank you very much for coming on the Win podcast. We really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you today. And, hopefully all our listeners learned a lot about it. So streamlining processes, we really appreciate it. So we'll see you next time.
And we're looking forward to, moving forward with the process program that you've got to help us with our operations. So
sweet. Looking forward to supporting you all as well. So excited about that. Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation and hope all the listeners enjoy that as well. If you want to reach out to me at any time, ZACH at LeadSimple.com, Zach at LeadSimple.com. I'd be happy to talk about anything and everything related to real estate, process management, etc.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast on Win, your community for investing knowledge for growth. Please take a second to rate us so that we can get more great investors to interview. If you or someone you know wants to be on, please go to westsideinvestors.com and fill out our form.